Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, my name's Peter. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about renting property in Thailand. I'm going to offer you some of my advice, my experiences. I had a look around YouTube and there's quite a lot of videos where people have actually got their apartments already and they've made videos and they basically film their new apartment and they'll show you what they get for their money, and they're quite good videos. But there isn't a lot of videos on YouTube that actually tell you how to go about finding the apartment, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So there's two areas I'm going to talk about, obviously Bangkok, and I'm going to talk about outside of the city of Bangkok in other locations, other towns around Thailand. In my experience, it's actually easier to find accommodation outside of Bangkok than it actually is in Bangkok, and I'll explain why that is a little bit later on, and also I'll tell you one or two of the perils that you've got to watch out for. So firstly, we're going to talk about Bangkok, and the obvious choice when you get there is agents. There's a lot of agents, like there is in any country. You can go along to an agent and they'll do all the legwork for you. But in my experience, I don't think an agent is the best way to find an apartment. They're quite expensive, a lot of them. Some of them are better than others. If you're a person who'd like to use an agent, then obviously you'd have to do your own research. But myself, I'd rather do the legwork myself. I just find you get much better deals. You'll have to decide whether you want to live in a condo, an apartment, a house. If you're living in central Bangkok, it's unlikely that you're actually going to live in a standalone house. You're probably going to be living in a condominium or apartment. Okay, so one of the first pitfalls I'm going to tell you about is a lot of the apartments, if you do go through the internet to look for apartments, one of the biggest pitfalls you'll find is everybody wants to live next to an MRT station, an overhead train station, and it's obvious why, because you can get into town very quickly and very cheaply. So agents have latched onto this, and people who advertise apartments. So what will happen is there'll be an apartment advertised, and it'll say it's very close to the train station. And when you look at the map, the train station looks within walking distance, just a few minutes. But the reality is, a lot of these apartments, they're quite far from the MRT station, the train station. And if you know, Thailand's a very hot, humid country, and if you had to go to work in the morning, you've got a fresh shirt on, then obviously by the time you got to the train station, you're going to be sweating. You don't want that. Or the other way is to jump on a back of a motorbike to get to the station, but then obviously that's another cost you've got to incur. So be very, very careful of that. You know, it's quite dangerous to actually just book apartments online without ever seeing them. And like everywhere else in the world, some of the descriptions are not that accurate. So the way I'd go about finding an apartment in Bangkok, obviously the biggest problem finding an apartment in Bangkok is just the sheer size and getting around. So what you've got to do, first of all, you've got to decide what location you want to live. If you want to be around an expat area, somewhere like Sukhumvit, you're going to pay a lot more than if you lived out of town a little bit. I did make a video a while back about living quite a way out of the centre of town. I'll link that in at the end of this video. That was a gated community about 18 kilometres out of Bangkok. That's quite interesting. So you've got to decide whereabouts in Bangkok you want to live, first of all. Decide on your location. And as I say, if you want to hang around Sukhumvit, them sort of areas, expat areas, because they've got, you know, all the foreign restaurants, Starbucks, all that sort of thing, you're going to pay a lot more. So what I would suggest to you is, if you want to do that, just get somewhere on the MRT line. You know, go down to, instead of staying around Soi, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, those sort of areas, even Asok, it's very, very expensive. Then what I would suggest is you go further down the line, you know, head down to somewhere like Edgamaya, Unnut, those sort of locations. It's a very easy journey to get in by train, and you'll have a lot more opportunities and a lot more choice. And the further out you go, the cheaper it'll be. So what I used to do when I was looking for an apartment for myself in Bangkok, or a room, I never used agents. I never looked on the internet, because I always found when I looked on the internet, something had looked great, and then when I turned up, I was disappointed. So I gave up on the internet completely. As far as agents go, you know, there's nice shiny cars parked at the front of their shops. They have to be paid for. Their staff have to be paid for. Nothing wrong with that. It's business like everywhere else, but I'm not paying for it. So what I would suggest, what I used to do, this is me personally, what I used to do. So I would hire one of these motorbike taxis for an afternoon, I can't remember what I paid, but it wasn't expensive. And if you haven't been to Bangkok before, near enough every sort of corner there's a group of motorcycles, and they're taxis, basically. They're licensed taxis, and you can do a deal. Some of these guys speak English if you don't speak any Thai at all, and you can do a deal. I don't know what it would cost for an afternoon now, maybe a 500 baht, 1,000 baht, but even 1,000 baht, you're looking about £22, maybe $30. It's not a lot of money, really. And if he speaks a little bit of English or you speak some Thai, then what you can explain to him, you can say, look, I'm looking for an apartment. This is the area I'm going to look. But basically, you'll be stopping and starting all afternoon. And you just jump on the back of his bike, tell him where to go, and just look around. And what you'll find is most of the apartments, when they have rooms to rent, they'll have a sign outside. And it will be written in Thai, but they always write for rent. So you'll see a board under a window or next to the door. It will have a lot of Thai writing on it, a few lines of Thai writing, and then in big capital letters it will say for rent. Now, what that normally means is they have a room or an apartment. So obviously, as you're driving around, you're going to see an apartment building it looks like it's going to be within your budget. You know, obviously you're going to know your own budget. There's some very expensive apartments in Bangkok, but there is apartments to suit every budget, and rooms, of course. So you'll see one of these signs. The apartment building looks okay. It looks like it could be within your budget. You ask the motorbike taxi to stop, and you just go in and ask the question, have you got a room to rent? And 9 times out of 10, there'll be enough, they'll know enough English to be able to communicate with you. And in my experience, what will happen, they'll say yes, they'll tell you what the apartment costs, they'll show you the apartment or the room, and then you can take it further from there. And that's how I used to do it in Bangkok. Just rent a motorbike, a motorcycle taxi, and just, you know, hit the streets all afternoon. If you've got to do it a second and a third time, you'll find if you do that, you're more likely to find something that suits you a lot better than, you know, if you were to go through an agent. That's my advice in Bangkok. So I'll talk now a little bit about renting somewhere outside of Bangkok in another town, either somewhere like Pattaya or Khon Kaen or Hua Hin. It's a lot easier to find accommodation in these locations, and the reason it's easier is just simply getting around, what I've just touched on with a motorbike taxi, because you can rent your own motorcycle. I was recently in Hua Hin. I rented a bike for about 150 baht a day. It was a Honda Click 125, something like that. It's fairly safe if you don't go on the highway. And I was actually with a friend who was looking for an apartment, and that's all we did. We rolled around one day, and everywhere there was a sign, it said for rent. It'll either say for rent or room for rent, something like that. We just stopped, we went in, and we must have looked at 10, 12 rooms. He was looking for a room, not an apartment. Eventually he found one. He did the deal with the owner who lived in the building, and that's how he did it, and that's probably the best way to do it. So, you know, there is a lot of legwork involved. One of the pitfalls you have to watch out for is the electricity cost. Always ask how much is the electricity per unit, because the government rate, I think it used to be about 4 baht a unit. It might be 4.5 a unit, but you'll normally find, especially in Bangkok, in the condo buildings, you'll normally find that the landlords are charging more than the government rate, anything up to sort of 8, 9 baht. And as the air conditioning is going to be your biggest cost, that can make a big difference to the cost of electricity. For instance, you know, 4.5 baht, if you used 1,500 baht of electricity a month and the landlord suddenly decided not to charge 4.5 but 9 baht, then obviously your bill would shoot up to over 3,000 baht. So that's, you know, it's quite hard to negotiate the electricity prices, because they tend to dig their heels in, and whatever they charge, and that's a decision you'll have to make yourself. But what I would say, wherever you decide to, where you're considering to rent, do ask the question, how much is the electricity per unit? It's very, very important. Water, I wouldn't worry about water too much. It's very, very cheap in Thailand. I'm not talking about drinking water. I'm talking about the water you flush in your toilet and wash with. It's not a great deal, so that's not really a concern. And just back to renting somewhere like Pattaya and Hua Hin. So, as I say, the easiest way to do it is you just rent a motorbike and, you know, just go around and have a look. And the good thing about renting in somewhere like Pattaya or Hua Hin or Khon Kaen or wherever else it is, you've now got the choice of maybe renting a small house, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. Depending on your budget, you might be able to rent a 3-bedroom house with a swimming pool. The further out you go, as I said earlier, even from these towns, the cheaper it will be. Personally, I prefer to rent apartments. There's a lot of plus points for me. Number one, the security. There's only one place you can enter the apartment. That's through the front door, unless it's a ground floor apartment, which is very unlikely. They normally have a security system in place, either a key card at the front door. If it's a little bit more of an expensive apartment, you might even have a concierge. And I just find that the security of apartment makes me sleep better at night. You know, security, like every other country, is an issue. You have to decide what's going to be best for you. The other thing you need to think about when you rent an apartment, very, very important, ask them what facilities they have, because in Bangkok, the competition is very tough in the rental markets. It's going to be even tougher after COVID. Less people visiting the country. There's a lot of new buildings have gone up recently. And just ask what facilities, if you're in the apartment building, ask what facilities they have and go and look at them. A lot of the apartments now, they'll have a nice swimming pool, they'll have a gym. You know, is there a 7-Eleven convenience store nearby, or is there another shop? Do they have a laundry in the basement? These are all things to take on board. And basically that's about it. There isn't really a lot more to tell you about renting an apartment. If you've got any questions, you can leave them in the comments, but I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you next time around. Thanks for watching this one.